Hello, young students of ancient history. Today we are moving out of the Greek world and into the realm of Rome, the great city that would originate the largest and greatest empire that the ancient world had ever seen. And it is in this final chapter of the ancient world that we will conclude this course. But today we will begin by examining where this small backwater little city here in the midst of Italy on a small river would give birth to this massive land empire that turned the Mediterranean Sea into a Roman lake. So let us begin by looking at sort of ancient Italia. And when I say Italy in this lecture, and from here on out, it is not a united front where everyone speaks Latin, but it's rather a group of really a confederation of tribal and regional states. It's more like Greece, really, than the unified Roman state that will come later. And early Italia is basically made up into four regions. At least from a Roman perspective, that they thought that in the north you have here Etruria, which are it's really a mysterious people. It's really unclear where the Etruscans came from. Why? Because we can't read their language. They had writing, but we cannot read it. And then there are within Etruria other groups of people like the Samnites, who are the neighbors here, just on the other side of the Apennine mountains that run down right down the spine of Italy here. And then you have Latium, which is where Rome will come out of, and Campania, which is the region just south of Rome. And then you have in the very south of Italy, Magna Graecia. So that is Greater Greece, which is where all the Greek colonies that we talked about, this is where that they are located at, is down here. And this is really the most sophisticated urban area of Italy, is in Magna Graecia. So again, here's just a little bit of a geographical view of the physical features here of Italy, and you see this very mountainous spine, the Apennine Mountains that run right down the heart of Italy here. This is really a dividing line between east and west in Italy. And you can see here, this is in the north, if you really want to sound sophisticated, is Gallia Cisalpina, or Gaul on this side of the Alps. And this is where the Celts, you remember our friends the Celts from several lectures ago, this is where they would descend in and they would control Gallia Cisalpina, because they were called Gauls by the Romans. They would control this area until quite late almost into the imperial period. But it takes a very long time for the Romans to conquer the Celts. But we'll come to that later. So in early Italia, around 1000 BC, which is really the beginnings of the Iron Age, we began to see sort of an explosion of population throughout Italy, and we see urban settlements that begin up here in the Po Valley, and along really all the river valleys within Italy. And as I was saying, our friends the Celts, who cross the Alps and they move into Gallia Cisalpina, which is the Po Valley there, and which is the River Po. And they move in and settle there, and they remain there for over 450 years. And in the south, you have really the economic heartland of Italy, at least at the early part of the beginnings of the Roman world, because this is where the largest urban centers were, and they were beginning to trade, and they're colonies of Greece, so they are going back and forth. They have really a well-established and highly sophisticated culture that the rest of Italy just simply does not. So Rome itself is born in sort of this Iron Age city of shepherds, and Rome itself is just a very, very small settlement up on one of the hills, the Capitoline Hill, right on the Tiber River. And the earliest people we have, there is no writing from this early period, but archaeology suggests that the people who lived in the hills, which is around Rome and in Rome, it's actually a very hilly region. The people who lived in the hills were herders or shepherds, and those who lived in the Tiber Valley were farmers, right? They were agriculturalists. And within these peoples, if you had a horse, you generally you were considered an aristocrat of sorts, of whatever that means in the ancient Roman world. But warfare is very localized and regional. It's not there are not large armies, but a few score men and led by their local captains, but there are not really kings and really powerful political leaders at this point in Rome's history. And the earliest civilizations that we have really in early Italia are the Villanovans. We don't know much about them. They don't have any writing or anything that we can really decipher, but the Villanovans are they are gone by about 700, and they're taken over by the Etruscans and the Gauls, and the Greeks began colonizing the south of Italy around 800. So theories go that the Villanovans are this they are Indo-Europeans probably who come in with the Great Migrations around 1200, 1300 when the migrations in Europe began, just shortly before the Celts show up. And the Celts are probably largely responsible for pushing out or overcoming, invading, taking over, migrating, and assimilating with the Villanovan culture. But again, we just simply don't know because it's a written culture, so we have to go off what archaeology can tell us. Now let's look at the other and probably the most sophisticated civilization in northern Italy, and this is the Etruscan culture. And as I said earlier, we can't read Etruscan writing, so we have to look at archaeology. But what we do know about the Etruscans are that they are a pretty sophisticated people. They had art, and they had literature, and they had political organization. And Tim Cornell, whose book you can see right up here if you want to know more about the Etruscans, has really done about the best job I think that you can do in explaining how the Etruscans came to really influence the Romans. And he even argues that there is an Etruscan period within Rome that within the writings of Livy, who you will be reading for this course, that Livy suggests that the last three kings of Rome actually bear Etruscan names, and he indicates that one of them indeed comes from Etruria. So was there an Etruscan period within the Roman monarchy? It is possible, but we clearly see that there is an enormous influence of the Etruscans upon early Roman civilization, and even later that there's many features of the Etruscans that are adopted by the Romans. So Rome itself is made up of 7 mountains or hills, and it's right on the edge at a strategic point in a bend in the Tiber River as it makes its way out to sea. And we don't have any written records, but what archaeology can suggest to us is that there was a gradual settlement. Livy, in his great work, will say that Romulus, the legendary founder of the city, founded it immediately. That it was just founded and then it sprung up and became a powerful and great city. But rather, archaeology suggests that this is maybe something more in legend rather than fact, that that there is evidence that beginning around as early as 1500 BC, when the first people really start to show up, who are shepherds, we have a little bit of pottery evidence from that, and really settlement begins around the year 1000. And we see excavations subsequently have shown that there is some reason to believe that there was a significant founding within the 8th century BC, which is when Livy suggests in 753 is when the legendary founding of Rome takes place by Romulus. But again, that is unclear, and it's kind of controversial evidence because this was discovered right under the Mussolini government, and they were wanting to think of themselves as the ancestors, the true ancestors of the Romans. So again, it's a little bit controversial, some of these archaeological findings. But we do see things within Livy's legendary writings, such as Aeneas found the prince who escapes from Troy in the Trojan War, coming to Italy and setting up shop in Etruria, and we see worship of Aeneas as early as 450. So there may be something to Livy's writings and what his suggestions about the early founding of Rome. But what archaeology can definitively tell us that this was a gradual build-up, and that Rome was simply not built and founded overnight. So you have looked at mythology, and we have seen its power and influence, and the Romans are no different. And Livy is one of Rome's finest historians, writers, and thinkers. And my respect for him knows no bounds. But Livy sets out to sort of categorically tell you how Rome came about. He's going to put together all these pieces of mythology. He's going to bring it together, and he is going to write an authoritative history and try to make sense of all the legends in his own time. And he is writing at the time of the Roman Revolution, and the Emperor Augustus and Caesar and all these guys have thrown over the old republic, and what Livy really loves, what he sees as the golden age of Rome, is the early republican period, of where these noble Romans who were filled with virtue and zeal for Rome itself were able and willing to sacrifice an enormous amount, that their honor and zeal for the state, for Rome itself, was greater than their own ambitions, which he saw as being, in his own day, the absolute opposite. That the ambitions of the Caesars, of Julius Caesar, or of Octavian Caesar, Mark Antony, and these kinds of people, that their own personal ambitions were far more important than the greater good of Rome itself. And he makes this great statement within his History of Rome. He says, "I hope my passion for Rome's past has not impaired my judgment. For I do honestly believe that no country has ever been greater or purer than ours, or richer in good citizens and noble deeds." And of course, he is referring to the Republican period. But Livy suggests that Rome has, he wants to argue that the legendary founding of Rome comes from the Trojans, and that the greatness of Rome is equal to that of the most legendary figures in the ancient world that come straight out of the Trojan War. So Pius Aeneas comes from all the way from Troy, finding his way through a great struggle, and eventually sets up a shop, as I say, in Etruria, and his son Ascanius is part of this legendary founding as well. And I don't have time to get into the entire story of it, but eventually Romulus and Remus, the twins that founded Rome, or the twin brothers, the sons of Rhea Silvia, and as well as the god Mars, are the direct descendants of Aeneas through the line of Ascanius, who founds a kingdom. And so it goes, like most legendary founding myths. Rhea Silvia was a Vestal virgin, meaning that she could not get pregnant under pain of death, and sure enough, she winds up pregnant, but fortunately for her, it was by the god Mars. So this gets her out of a little bit of trouble, and she's also the daughter of a king, and this helps as well. So sure enough, she has two twin boys, and they're put into a basket and set out on the Tiber River, where they're discovered by a shepherd who raises the two boys, and they quite quickly come to become great and powerful people, and recognized later by their grandfather, who is the king. And then they eventually go on to found a city. And as there are many legends for the founding of Rome, but the story goes that Romulus and Remus, they competed, and in some fashion or the other, and a disagreement comes up between them over what they should name the city, whether they should name it Rome or Rheims. And so they take signs from the gods, or one makes fun of the other, and there's several competing stories. But anyway, it comes to loggerheads, and Romulus and Remus get into a fight, and Romulus kills Remus. And therefore the city is going to be named Rome. And Romulus takes over as the first king, and we will come to the kings here in a bit. But there is a legendary story called, or it's often called, the rape of the Sabines, and this comes from the Latin because the Sabine women are seized by the Romans, and the Sabines are a group of neighboring peoples, and the Romans, after Romulus had founded the city, they decide to have a grand old party, and they invite their friends, the Sabines, only to, at an opportune moment, seize the Sabines' wives and daughters, and this kind of thing. And so it's called the rape of the Sabines because in Latin, rapatio simply means to seize. So the seizure of the Sabine women might be a better name for this, but nevertheless, it comes down to us as the rape of the Sabines. And after they seize the Sabine women, obviously the Sabine men are a little bit unhappy about this. And Livy relates to us a great passage when the Romans, who have at this point married the Sabine women and they have fathered children with them, they are not going to give them up, and the Sabine men also come out to fight, and they're getting ready to go to war. And Livy really here tells a great tale of the women's role within this part. So Livy writes, says, "This was the moment the Sabine women played their decisive part. They braved the flying spears and thrust their way in a body between the embattled armies. They parted the angry combatants. They besought their fathers on one side and their husbands on the other to spare themselves the curse of shedding kindred blood. 'We are mothers now,' they cried. 'Our children are your sons, your grandsons. Do not put on them the stain of patricide. If the relationship between you is hateful to you, turn your anger against us. We are the cause of strife. On our account, our husbands and fathers lie wounded or dead, and we would rather die ourselves than live on either widowed or orphaned.'" Livy tells us, "The effect of the appeal was immediate and profound. Silence fell, and not a man moved. A moment later, the rival captain stepped forward to conclude a peace." So Livy here is relating a legendary story, and he is suggesting that through this colorful mythology, that this is how Rome was able to expand. And there is a gradual expansion of the Roman Republic, and one of these ways was through taking over the realm of the Sabines. And it's not that interesting to simply tell a story of a careful diplomatic conquest, but rather that they became part of this homogeneous group out of strife, and that through intermarriage, through diplomacy, that they were able to come together and build this one state out of two peoples. And I think this is what Livy is trying to tell us, and this is what some of this legendary material it is. It relates to this mythology. Remember, within all mythology is a kernel of truth. So let us turn for a moment to the monarchical period, the Regal period, as it's usually called, in the early Rome. And I would remind you, this is legendary stuff here. This is not. There wasn't probably really a king, NUMA Pompelius, who lived, almost 60 years, and each one of these kings is extraordinarily long-lived. And like the sage emperors of China that we looked at earlier, these are figures that bring one particular great innovation that the Roman state later adopts, or that explains something of why things are the way they are. So who brought religion to Rome? Why do we do all the things that we do in Rome with religion? Well, it's because of Numa Pompelius, that he brought all these religious ceremonies and invented the priesthoods, and that it was through his revelations of the gods that came all these things. Why do we fight the way we do? Why do we have the political organization that we do? Why do we have a centuriate assembly? Well, it's because of the reforms of Tullus Hostilius and Ancus Marcus. Well, they reformed how the Romans did things politically. Why do we have senators that descend all the way from that we call the fathers? Well, this is because Romulus had the original founders of the city. They were all part of the original Senate that Romulus called to help him govern. It's these kinds of things. And the last kingdom is one of the most important. So that's Tarquinius Superbus, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, or Tarquin the Proud. And he will be the last king of Rome, and Rome never had a king ever again after that. They had emperors, they had people like Julius Caesar who took power, but Rome, no Roman would say we ever had a king after we overthrew Tarquin and drove him and his family out of Rome. That after that, Rome was always a republic. Even in the times of the emperors of Rome, they would still say they were not kings, but they were stewards of the republic, though they were not. So, Rome comes to become this. Rome comes to be thought of as a legendary regal state, that the kings created the world that the early Romans lived in, and after the first few kings, that the kingship begins to decline. And they create some things that are part of the early Roman Republic, and when we have better records, like the Senate, as I was saying, becomes the King's Council, becomes the Senate under Romulus. And just things like this are part of what the Roman regal period was. But again, this is all legendary stuff, and Livy recounts a lot of this, but you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt. So, as I was saying, we will just very briefly look at the kings here, but the first was Romulus, and I kind of discussed how he started things. He establishes the Senate, or the Fathers, or the Patricians, as we will come later to know them, or the ancient families, that your senatorial families, meaning that you had to have an ancestor, you had to be one of the founding families of Rome in order to be called to this patrician order or to serve in the Senate. And this is why is Rome organized into these clever 30 units? Well, it's because Romulus did it. Why do we have 3 centuries, which are the military orders? Well, it's because Romulus did it. And eventually, there is this thing called an apotheosis, meaning God made man, or man made God. And Romulus ascends into heaven as a god at the end of his life. That he is taken literally into heaven. And as I was saying, Numa Pompelius, he founds all the religious orders, legendary, keeping in mind. And then Tullus Hostilus, you have the um, military reforms, same with Ancus Marcus. And then you see the Etruscan kings that begin, which is Tarquinius Priscus, who is the first of the Etruscan kings and these sort of people who come out of Rome. And remember, I said Tim Cornell suggests that this is the kernel of truth in Livius' writing, that, or in Livius' legendary writings here, that show a potential Etruscan period of Rome, that an external force may have come and controlled Rome for a while. But during this time, and the Etruscans were great builders, far more sophisticated than the early Romans, this may preserve a memory that that this Etruscan knowledge led to the building of some of the greatest things in Rome, which were the Circus Maximus, which is the great racing area. Then you have the walls of Rome, the Cloaca Maxima, which is the sewer. Now, if you have 100,000 people living in one place, you might think that the sewers are not that exciting of a thing, but this is essential to the building of any settlement, is having a good functioning sewer. So this is a very, very important construction to making a great city, is having a great sewer. And then the building into the temples of the gods. Again, you see this continuation of Greek and Etruscan culture through the Roman gods. And then we see again more things happening. Great reforms under the this legendary king Servius Tullus. And finally, we will get to Tarquinius Priscus, or Tarquinius Superbus, excuse me, who is Tarquin the Proud. And he tries to rule arbitrarily, that he simply seizes power as a tyrant. He was not elected by the fathers or the Senate, and he is not a nice fellow. And he really fails in many ways to govern the state, and it is the very unfortunate event here of one of his sons, Sextus Tarquinius, who he and his buddies, one of whom being Lucius, Junius, Brutus, that they are having a good night, a good evening, and having some wine, and they kind of all get drunk, and they start to argue about whose wife is the most noble, who is the most virtuous. And so they all sort of make bets, and they ride back to Rome as they're camping outside of Rome, and they come to the house of one of the captains of Sextus Tarquinius, and his wife Lucretia, who here is pictured, is weaving with her maidservants. And while everyone else's wives are out partying or having a good time and doing things that they shouldn't be doing, she is thought or seen to be the most virtuous. And Sextus Tarquinius is overwhelmed with passion at this point for Lucretia. And when he is overwhelmed, that the rest of the captains, they go out and they go away. But Sextus Tarquinius returns to Lucretia's house. And Livy writes then, he says, kindled in Sextus Tarquinius the flame of lust, he determined to debauch her. He drew his sword and made his way to Lucretia's room, determined to rape her. And he writes about Lucretia. He says, not even the fear of death could bend her will. If death will not mire you, Sextus cried, dishonor shall. I will kill you first, then cut the throat of a slave, and lay his naked body by your side. Will they not believe that you have been caught in adultery with your servant? Lucretia yielded finally, and Sextus enjoyed her, and rode away, proud of his success. The unhappy girl wrote to her father in Rome and to her husband. And they came to her, and they found Lucretia sitting in her room in deep distress. They told her she was helpless, and therefore innocent, that that he, Sextus, alone was guilty. It was the mind, they said, that sinned, and not the body. Without intention, there could never be guilt. And Lucretius says in a great speech here, says, "Never, never shall Lucretia provide a precedent for unchaste women to escape what they deserve." And with these words she drew a knife from under her robe and drove it into her heart and fell forward. Then Brutus drew the bloody knife from Lucretia's body, and holding it before him, he cried, "By this girl's blood, none more chaste till a tyrant wronged her. By all the gods, I swear, with this sword and fire and whatever else can lend me strength to my arm, I will pursue Lucius Tarquinius, the proud, his wicked wife, and all his children, and never again will I let any other man be king of Rome." Rousing stuff from Livy. And whether or not we can debate the merits of Lucretia's act, that this is the event that triggers the overthrow of the Roman monarchy, that the virtue of a woman, the honor of a woman, or that she decided to preserve her own honor over living with her shame. Whether this is right or wrong is not for us to judge at this point, but simply to show that this event so inspired the people around her that they picked up swords, and they eventually, the first consul of Rome is Brutus, the guy who was making that speech there. He rallies all the citizens of Rome, and they sure enough drive the Tarquins out of Rome. And this is the last king, and at that point the Roman Republic is set up. So this concludes our lecture for the Regal period, and next time we will begin examining that sacred thing, the Roman Republic. So I hope you have come to have an appreciation for early Italia within this lecture, and the growth of the Regal period, and the power of Livy and his legendary tales within this narrative of the early Roman period. So until next time, stay healthy, wealthy, and wise.